Welcome to the Crystal Zinn podcast. I believe our bodies are a living map of the entire universe. All the answers reside within. Remember, you are sovereign, whole, and infinitely valuable. And the best gift we can give to the world is our own healing. Join me as we explore holistic tools, spiritual practices, and paradigms that are shifting the way people experience life, business, and relationships. I love to share education on the most recent medical research and cutting-edge technology on anatomy, neurology, trauma, development, and more to give us a foundation in understanding how to align, utilize, and upregulate our physical systems. Ultimately, this podcast is a witness and support to people on their journey of remembering, an inspiration for all of us to keep going, and a reminder that we are not alone. Okay, welcome to my first ever solo podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a really long time, and there's been a couple of factors in the way, but today it's gonna happen, and I think it's gonna have two benefits. One, I get to get some of this information out there that people have been asking for, and hopefully it's helpful and it helps to teach what we're learning. And so we're all kind of being elevated by these discussions and by teachings. And two, my close friends don't need to listen to me go on and on about these subjects when we're at the gym or when we're hanging out, because I will get it out of my system here. So for those who want to hear it, it's going to be here now on my short podcast, my solo cast, and on my YouTube channel. So today, the thing that has been coming up for a little while, and the thing that is circulating in conversation with friends, healers, people in this world, clients, is this idea of trusting the flow. And I want to say it in two ways: trusting the flow and trusting the divine feminine. And there's a lot of rhetoric out there, and I'm not the expert on it, but I do love reading a lot of people's ideas and a lot of experts, in relationship and in trauma work and things regarding these subjects. So the first thing I want to do is define some qualities of the divine feminine and kind of pull that apart in our minds and get a little clarity there. Trust the flow of the divine feminine. This means to fully believe in the natural, intuitive flow of energy associated with the concept of the divine feminine. And that embodies qualities like creativity, nurturing, receptivity, and deep inner knowing. Essentially trusting that by aligning with this energy, positive outcomes will naturally unfold in your life without having to force anything. It's like the magnetism principle, or the relaxing into it. And I want you to think if this ever has happened to you, because this happens to me all the time. When maybe a schedule doesn't work out, or I don't know how a problem's gonna get resolved, or I can't figure something out in my parenting or in my work life. And I've tried, and usually it's because of exhaustion or hitting my head against enough brick walls. I just stop. Maybe you've stopped. Maybe you've not known how your Thursday is gonna work out, or how this issue at work is gonna work out, but you just sort of feel calm about it, like it is gonna work out, and you'll be accepting of the outcome. And then lo and behold, that morning, like the meeting you couldn't make it to, they cancel on you, right? Or the $10 I need, someone found something on my Facebook marketplace and purchases it just in the nick of time. So it's sort of this concept of like doing less and holding the vibration can attract outcomes that are really good for your life, really desirable outcomes, without having to force it. There is some discussion surrounding some of these qualities of the divine feminine that I've been noticing, and I found in a lot of my research, and some misunderstandings. And the misunderstanding number one about the energy of the divine feminine is that it's not strong, and it's chaotic or unboundaried. And I propose that that is not true, and that the energy of the divine feminine is actually extremely strong, extremely powerful, extremely passionate, extremely driven. It's just the method by which that specific energy would go about obtaining or creating is just a little bit different than the masculine. And when I like to talk about these things, it's helpful for me to picture them both in my own body. And that helps me stay out of like paradigms or misunderstandings or labels, putting it on something outside of myself or this person or this concept. Because truly our bodies and us are our best teachers. So if we can feel it, embody it, learn it here, then we can see it mirrored in the outside world. Then we can recognize it. And I know that that makes sense to you because, you know, if you felt sad and you see sadness in another, you're like, oh, I know what that is. But when you see an emotion or something on another that you've exiled or you haven't experienced or you can't remember, it's hard to connect. So if we could use that framework in this solo cast about the divine masculine and feminine just being energy is embodied within one person as opposed to outward symbols, that's really helpful for understanding how to trust the flow of this specific energy. So I want to circle back and say two things about this energy I've learned is it is very strong. It knows what it wants, and it is actually boundaried because it knows what it wants. And boundaries, or the lack of boundaries, are a symptom of not knowing yourself, not trusting yourself, not knowing what you want, and specifically the divine feminine. So when you're fully embodying this energy, it's not go with the flow and whatever goes and I'm going to be blown by the wind. It actually is a deep inner knowing of what I want, where I want to be, what serves me, what doesn't serve me. And hopefully, of course, like the Buddha says, it's about how gently we've lived, right? How we tell the truth and how gently we let go of things that don't belong to us. So it doesn't need to be aggressive or hurtful in any way, but that deep inner knowing does have boundaries and does have an inherent strength. So if you're missing some of that, if maybe you've said in your life, gosh, I'm having this issue with boundaries, and you're looking to the masculine energy in yourself to start asserting and moving forward and logistically or chronologically putting reason and things in order, I would suggest trying to lean deeper into the divine feminine, to healing, into flow, trust, intuition, and self-awareness. So here's the second thing I wanted to mention in how to trust the divine feminine within yourself. And that is emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence comes up all the time. It comes up in a lot of Esther Perel's work I've been reading. It comes up in psychological studies. And it's something I was actually told really young. I think I was about 12 or 13 when my parents had us read this book on emotional intelligence. And one of the things that really stood out to me the most was that a sign of emotional intelligence was being able to accurately assess your own weaknesses, gifts, talents, and abilities. And so an under exaggerated perception of yourself is lacking a little bit of emotional intelligence. So a lot of it is on perception. And I do want to read you the definition as per like the internet on emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage your emotions, as well as understand and influence the emotions of others. It can often be measured in an emotional quotient. And some of the tenets here are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So for me, a lot of those tenets tag back to this idea in the divine feminine sort of theory and description. And if you like the chakra model or toolkit, the second chakra, because self-awareness is a deep feeling, discovery, labeling, scaffolding way to talk about your emotions. Deep inner work, parts work, things where you just get to know yourself in so many deep ways. And that gives you a benefit in almost every area of your life. Self-regulation, that's also the ability, right, to deal with those emotions, to hold them, to increase your capacity, and to let them flow. Motivation seems like a tenet of passion as well, which I was described a triangle in my pelvis one time where, one side is motivation, one side is passion, and the bottom of the triangle is purpose. So you have to have all three tenets for your legs to anatomically step forward. And that's where we find the psoas muscle, that's where we find the second chakra. So all in this area of the body is purpose, passion, motivation, things like that. And they're all tenets of emotional intelligence, and that's the center for emotions. Empathy, understanding and relating to the emotion of others, right? What you know deeply in yourself, you can know deeply in others, and what you don't, you can't understand in others. And then that leads into social skills. So I wanted to give a little plug for how to become more emotionally intelligent, resilient, besides lectures, videos. There's so many tools. It's basically all the healing tools that we talk about in this podcast, or guests I've had on, or things you've maybe been suggested, like from things like yoga to breath work to physical activity, to learning how to fail, building resiliency, cognitive therapy, all of these types of things, especially social interactions and safe environments, will help increase that emotional intelligence. A lot of things that decrease emotional intelligence are trauma, because trauma and circumstances and ideas and basically nurture instead of nature can teach people to protect themselves or draw out traits in their personality that prevent them from accessing truth or emotional intelligence, because they're scared, because they're protecting themselves. And so a lot of work to repair and heal trauma and understand yourself better just naturally increases your emotional intelligence. I wanted to add this quote in right here from Kute Blackson, and I'll tag the sources in the show notes.
Deeper I go, the less choice I have, the freer I feel. The more an ego I was, the more choice I thought I had, the more limited I was. What I have found through my experience is when we surrender, things may not go according to plan, but it will often be beyond your plan. And when you surrender, what I have found is you will always end up, always. This is a promise. You talk about promise. You will always end up in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right thing, even though the path that you take may not be the one that you most expect.
A therapist said to me once last year, "Where does your true safety come from?" And I couldn't really answer him. I had some good ideas, but what he told me was self-trust, self-knowledge builds self-trust. And if at the basis you have self-trust, you can navigate any partnership, any collaboration, any experience, because you start to realize that the things you're relying on outside of you are always changeable. And they're not as reliable as you may think they are, and you're not in control of that. And so the flow will scare you, change will scare you. Unreliable people or emotions or anything going on outside of the world will scare you if you don't recognize it and reclaim it inside of yourself and then build self-trust. So that was such a beautiful learning for me, and I'm still in it. There are areas of my life where I feel like I've learned that really well, and I can deal with these cycles and these flows and just really feel grounded in the knowing that this will change. This is part of the cycle. I've seen it 100 times, and honor where I'm at, but not make decisions based on where I'm at for the future. And that's a really important piece. And so I'm trying to leave a little information on how I have been able to detach from that behavior and where I'm able to access a full trust and inner knowing of being in the now, in the present moment, and not having that dictate or color my past or my mind stories or relegate all my future experiences to that prison of always being like this. And there's two parts of it that are really hard. When you're on the highest cycle of the upswing and you're expansive and it's like full moon energy, and you're getting feedback and accolades and you're reaping the things you sowed, that is a time where it's really hard to remember that's not going to stay. And a lot of times we get attached to that, and we may build the future based on that information, assuming that that's the modus operandi that's going to continue. And it would help us to understand the cycle, because it's typically not, right? So I challenge you to kind of think of some times in your life when you were like, yeah, I was way up here and I thought it was going to last forever. I kind of planned for that. So I was ill prepared when the cycle took its course. And the other is the equal and opposite side of the cycle, when you're at the lowest and everything seems to be breaking down. And we can all think of a time that just happened to me last weekend, and it was very difficult to not go back in meetings, in relationships, in a lot of places in my life, and then look to everything in the future, which is, once again, not being mindful. None of that is truth, because it's not happening now. And then overlay or expect the bad things I was feeling to color and be the plan for everything else that's coming in my life. And I know it sounds horrible, and we would say, why would we ever do that? But we do that. Our brains do that to protect us and prepare us. So that brings me to the next skill, which I think is really important, which is mindfulness. How to stay in the moment. This, I think, is brought about by the ability to connect to ourselves. The things that pull us out of the present moment more often than any other thing is avoidance, inability to feel what we need to feel, inability to accept what we need to accept, and that begets our avoidance techniques. And also, I was going to add a third thing, which is kind of like a lack of tools, right? Or an inability to know how to do that. So bringing it back to sort of this idea of the divine feminine, that's a very embodied energy, right? Whereas the masculine is a very intellectual, ascension or logically, chronologically driven energy. So I looked at this idea of how do I embrace the divine feminine, and it was fascinating to me that the answer was connect with your body. And it's through so many activities, dance, breath, tuning into your body's sensations in any area, experimenting, exploring. This connects you to your intuition and your creativity. And it's all actually done through the physical body. How many times have I or you maybe sat there and tried to think our way out of a problem, talk our way out of a problem, reason something out? But this idea of getting into the body, I had one of my beautiful friends on the podcast not too long ago who's a somatic coach. And so she talked a lot, if you want, go back and catch that episode, about how important it is to process things through the body and what happens when you don't and what happens when you do, and the changes that are accessible to you at an exponential rate when you use the body and you get into the body to do these things. So emotional intelligence, being mindful, learning how to be in the moment, connecting to the body, building self-awareness. These are all things that I think are supportive and preemptory and aid and dictate how well we're able to trust the cycles in any moment. And that seemed to be the pervading theme of this message that keeps coming out, is not only how do I learn about, understand, and employ like the tools and the gifts of the divine feminine, but how do I trust it? And the reason why I think this is so important is because when a person has self-trust, they create a safe space for everybody around them. And when we're not in self-trust, we create a lot of chaos in our own lives and the people around us. So I'm not saying I'm exempt from this. I'm talking about this because I have learned it. I'm in the learning of it in one particular area of my life right now. I am sitting here with all this information going, how do I access these different formulas in this subject in my life? Because when these super highs come up, I am not fully trusting and surrendering to the flow. And when the lows come down, I can really get caught and stuck there. And we can get stuck there. We can drop into a portion of the cycle when we restrict and clench and don't surrender, it cogs up the wheels, right? Like it actually stops. It's like a clog in the piping. So we absolutely can restrict ourselves from the flow of the divine feminine or the universe. And it's a letting go or a surrendering that clears out those pipes so that we can continue to go around the cycle, which means we can't be afraid of it. So when you get on a roller coaster, you want it to be on that roller coaster, right? But there's a whole experience going into that roller coaster, thinking about it, planning it, waiting in line, getting on, being excited, the ramp up, being at the precipice at the top, you know, the wee on the way down, and then the decompression after, the talking about it, the processing it, and it continues to go. So if at any point in that cycle, we've experienced a trauma, or we get scared, or we have to come back and assess our tools, or something's coming up for us, like is for me right now. What is it about this that's so scary to me? What is it that's unconscious that I need to make conscious that's stopping this flow? And how can I re-access it? So again, I just want to say, looking into emotional intelligence, which does involve learning about yourself, self-awareness, learning how to be in the present moment by accessing the divine feminine methods, like learning about the body, breathing, dancing, moving, and then learning how to connect to ourselves and starting to find some trust in the cycle. And that can be a rhetoric. So when you're experiencing a part of the cycle, it's really helpful to say things like, I know this will pass because everything passes. I've been here before and I will be here again. How do I want to move through this time? When I'm on the other side of it, how do I want to be proud of how I handled it? Or how do I want to talk about it? How do I want to make sense of this? Another thing you can say is, if I knew everything was going to be all right, how would I act? I had a really beautiful lunch with my mom yesterday when I was telling her about some of these areas of deep fear in my life right now. And she was saying, you know, I really relate to that. Because when you were a teenager, I was in fear and anxiety all the time when you went through a hard period of your life. And she kept saying, if I remember thinking, if someone could just tell me, if I just knew that she was going to land on her feet or that everything was going to be all right, then I could relax. Then I could access this. Then I could act a certain way. Then I could be who I wanted to be, show up who I wanted to show up. And I'm expanding on that. She didn't say all those things. But the concept was there. And I found that really fascinating. And I really took it to heart and thought, where are these areas in my life where I'm not accepting the flow, not trusting the divine feminine, not trusting the cycle, that it will continually change. It's part of life and death. It will continue. Where am I restricting, closing, not trusting that, which is now an inability for me to show up in the way I want to and as the person I want to, and heaven forbid, even enjoy it, feel some joy, right? Like relish in the experiences, the sorrow, the joy, the happiness, the embarrassment, all of the parts of it, just experience life. It's restricting, for me, my experience of life when I'm in those places. So if I knew everything was going to turn out okay, how would I act right now? And that's a beautiful way to just bring us all back to the now. You know, I teach a lot about breath and run breath works and have meditations and things like that. So lest we forget, the best way to come back to the present moment when you're noticing a cycle that's a little dysregulating, or you're tempted to make permanent the breath, even one breath is such a beautiful reminder that we can trust the flow. It doesn't fix everything, but the presence of the moment is peace. And when we can access that, we are already acknowledging that everything's going to be okay. So I really love that. This solo cast was catalyzed for me because I went to Kundalini last week, and the theme that the teacher created was we're going to work on fear, which is the root chakra, and we're going to do self-reliance. As I've been working on this message, I pulled up an Instagram post from a teacher that I really like to work with and follow, and she had said, this is the mudra or the symbol or an active body pose for self-reliance. And so if you're watching on my YouTube, you'll see this. If you're just listening, it basically is lifting both your elbows up and clasping opposite wrists, like kind of on the forearms, right in front of your face. Not sure if her video was mirrored or not, so I'm not sure which hand she was actually showing in the back or front. So I tried both and sat with it for a while and breathed. And I thought, this works. This was really beautiful. Thank you for that gift. So clasping opposite wrists and forearms and sitting and feeling that. We learn in Kundalini anatomy that this also closes a circuit. So anytime you're closing the circuit, holding your hands or your feet or doing a pose where especially the palms on your body, on your own body, will circulate your energy, your torus field, back into your own self. And so it exponentially multiplies it as opposed to like going out and in or having to picture energy leaving the crown of the head and coming back in the root. You've actually closed that electromagnetic circuit, and it's super powerful. That's another thing I wanted to share. And if you've picked any of these things up and they help you, maybe just focus on one thing that feels resonant with you. The last thing I want to say about trusting the cycle is a model. And once again, if you're watching this on my YouTube, I'll throw a picture in here in the video of the model that I really like. And I drew one because this really, really helps me. I always circle back to it, pun intended, when this subject has got me on a deeper level. And so I drew down here like a circle. And a lot of things that I hear with people saying is, how am I here again? I thought I healed this, or I thought it was over this, or I thought I X, Y, and Z. And they're talking about it in a masculine, linear way. And then they find themselves back. Because if you see things in a straight line, then you're going to perceive when you reach a subject again, that it is back, reversed, lower, somewhere else in the timeline continuum. And so you've probably seen this before, but the most helpful way to think about it is on a flat paper. When you're coming around your diagram and say like this is your relationship. So picture yourself drawing a circle on a piece of paper. And this is your relationship with your mom. This is your relationship with money. And this is your parenting. And this is your business. And so we kind of go in these cycles where we're learning something and then, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with this relationship with my mom again. And you're moving forward in your mind, and then actually you're here again dealing with business problems or money relationship or something. And so it feels, and that rhetoric is very common, and you've probably heard it that, you know, I thought this was happening, but now I'm back. And it's very discouraging. It's very self-deprecating to talk about the self and your journey like that. And so if you've heard people say things like, I've circled back to this, but at a deeper level. I'm learning this again in a new way. It's such a beautiful rhetoric to think about it. And so what I did was just cut my circle up here. And what's actually happening is more like a spiral, like a Kundalini snake or a spiral moving upward. So you picture yourself circling back to the same spot. Here's my money problem. Here's my money problem. Here's my money problem. But what you're actually doing is you're circling back at an ascended layer. And I like to think of it as an ascended layer in lessons. Some people say deeper. And the way that resonates with me too is because I have a bigger capacity to understand more. So that's a beautiful way to circle back to it. Like I took math in first grade and I learned about numbers. I thought I passed. I thought I was done with it. And now I'm in second grade and I have to learn about multiplying and division. And you're like, man, there must be something wrong with me. I thought I was done with this. And so that's why all those rhetorics are useful, because you can say to yourself in second grade, no, You're just ready to understand this at a deeper level. You've been given more, or you've actually risen up, and so you're here now when you reach that. And then when you get to 3rd grade, 4th grade, your calculus in high school, you're here. And that doesn't mean anything negative or wrong or bad or unaccomplished about yourself, does it? Right? When we talk about math or something like that, that makes no sense. Of course you understand that you're adding to yourself when you're ready, and that's why you're circling back to this subject. And oh my gosh, there's infinite amount to learn in that subject. So why do we do it to ourselves in the emotional capacity or the relationship capacity or the pop spiritual healing world capacity? I think this is a really helpful model, and I wanted to offer this message because it feels like we can get really discouraged and lonely and stuck when we encounter these things again. It also feels like there's a lot of messages out there of getting to a certain place and being better. There's some currency in spiritual awareness right now. There's some currency in the type of person you are. And when there's a currency and a measurement in it now, there's a comparison. And there's a little disservice in the way we're thinking about it. So I'm hopeful that this model, because it's helped me so well, and it's the thing that keeps coming back when I'm stuck, that some of these concepts can help. I know I mentioned Esther Perel earlier. I was given her information by one of my really good friends who studies trauma and relationships and repairage and things in depth, and I love learning from him. But what Esther Perel said in some of my readings this week was, people say that desire dies. And she says that's wrong. She says the connection to ourselves or the connection to desire dies. That doesn't actually die. So anytime you find yourself not trusting the flow, not trusting what will come, unable to be in the right moment, unable to have any emotional intelligence surrounding it, the answer is to connect to yourself. And this is a very divine feminine thing to do. It builds trust in the divine feminine, and it works with the body. And every time you circle back to that at a more advanced or deeper or ascended layer, be fully there. Learn it. Be fully mindful. Don't think I did yoga yesterday, or like I've done yoga for 20 years, so there's nothing for me to learn in the body. No, that is a constant practice of circling back. It's self-awareness, it's trusting the divine feminine, and it's being in the present moment. So I love talking about these things. Thank you for listening if you made it to the end. If you want to check out any of my offerings right now or the retreat I have coming up in the summer of 2025, just head over to my website. I'll do the outro from my podcast on these. It's a minute and a half long. So you can hear all that information, and you're welcome to reach out to me that way on the socials or comment here and let me know what was helpful. And if you have any ideas of further solo cast subjects, let me know, and I will continue to try to throw up these 20-minute subjects and offer some help in the channel and the world that I'm working in right now, and just pass on those really important messages maybe once or twice a month. Satnam.
The deeper I go, the less choice I have, the freer I feel. The more an ego I was, the more choice I thought I had, the more limited I was. What I have found through my experience is when we surrender, things may not go according to plan, but it will often be beyond your plan. And when you surrender, what I have found is you will always end up, always. This is a promise. You talk about promise. You will always end up in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right thing, even though the path that you take may not be the one that you most expect.
Thank you for listening. Connect with me on Instagram at Crystal Zinn Yoga. Subscribe on my website at crystalzinnyoga.com to receive tools and practices for your holistic journey, and to be the first to know about offerings, workshops, trainings, and retreats. We live in powerful times that require courage, bravery, compassion, authenticity, community, and grounding. You're not alone. Check out my free content, classes, and meditations on YouTube under Crystal Zinn Yoga, and have a beautiful day. Sat Nam.